Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes, and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. We were standing in line waiting for Mrs. Rice to let us leave school. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in second grade, and behind me was a friend of mine, and we had a contentious relationship. She kept tapping my back and pushing and nudging and asking me questions. I don't remember now why this bothered me so much, but I kept telling her to stop it. I got in trouble for talking all the time, so I knew that if I was caught talking in line, I'd have to get out of line and go to the back, or sit at my desk and wait till everyone left and get yelled at. We began walking toward the staircase and down that would let us outside, and the friend behind me kept tapping my back, so I finally turned around and told her to stop it, and I kicked with my foot, and I kicked her folder out of her hand, and all of her papers went flying. And the two of us stood there dumbfounded. Not surprisingly, I got in trouble. I had to go sit in the classroom, and my friend was the victim in this case, and picked up all her papers, and her tears were comforted, and off she went. As I sat in the classroom, more angry now than ever, it dawned on me that I could just climb out the window and down the fire escape and go home, and all of this would be over. I had a dance class to go to. I knew my mother would be frantically waiting for me, and so I did. I got up and I left. Anger. Sometimes we can control what it makes us do, like deciding to climb out the window, and sometimes we can't, turning around and kicking the folder out of my friend's hands. In this 180th episode of 1,000 Tiny Steps, I'm going to skip my period for a week and talk about anger. As much as I try to construct and organize and schedule my life, it does not work for me. And it's one of those fights that the more I continue to try to micromanage myself, the more things blow up and the less things get done and the less better I feel about things. I didn't know, really, that this is one of the main causes of anger, this frustrating, powerless feeling that no matter what you do, things don't get fixed. In some ways, it's a very selfish feeling. It's all about me, right? My life is a mess because of me. I must be very important if my whole entire life is a mess because of me. We're taught, especially as women and little girls, to be quiet and polite and be peacekeepers, to make sure that we aren't disruptive. That's what boys do. They get to disrupt. These are stereotypes now, I know this. When I was in Bali and spending a beautiful day by the pool one day, I set my goals and intentions for 2025. Working out, getting fit, continuing the abstinence of alcohol, eating well, being on time or ahead with all of my commitments, podcasts and blogs, spending better time marketing myself, getting the Molly B Foundation up and running, qualifying for the CrossFit regionals. Oh, I have so many plans and goals. My BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. So we've just finished January, 31 days. We're 2 days into February, and I missed 14 days of working out. Let me tell you again, 14 out of 31 days, well, 33 if you count up to today. I didn't work out. And by that, I mean, I didn't work out. Nothing. No stretching, no running, no lifting, no going to CrossFit, nothing. The first 7 days of the new year, I was sick in Indonesia, and then traveling home from Indonesia, and then just arriving home from Indonesia. And justifiably so, fitting workouts in was difficult, if not impossible. Then I put together a string of pretty good days where I didn't miss workouts, but they weren't necessarily positive or intense. I hired my one-on-one coach for CrossFit programming and nutrition, Eric. We had an amazing call, got things started. And 1 week into my not expensive but not cheap private one-on-one coach, I developed pneumonia and RSV. So let's add another 7 days of no working out. Am I angry? You're darn right I'm angry. I'm pissed. Like, what the fuck? I just feel that from a year ago from now, January of 2024, all the way to now, has been one thing after another preventing me from doing what I want to do. So that's a very external view right there. I'm looking at all of the things in my life that are preventing me from doing what I want to do. And there are a lot of them. And some of them I have no control over, and some of them I can choose how to manage or control. Some of them are reality. All of them together contribute to my sense of powerlessness, which is typically the last step before anger. In my never-ending desire to figure out why things happened and what did I cause, and in my lifelong desire to figure out exactly what caused Molly's death, which of course there are too many factors to even decide which one was it, I will continue to ask these questions, and I will continue to look in the mirror and blame myself. And there will be people in my life that will say, see, she admits it. It's all her fault. And there are others who will say, now, Barbara, stop that. I got in trouble for climbing out the window in second grade. When I went to school the next day, I'd forgotten all about it. And my teacher didn't. And I was putting my shoes on, sitting in my cubby at the second floor of Dewey School, when Mrs. Rice came out and looked at me with that stern, one eyebrow up, Mrs. Rice face. And then it came rushing back. First, I thought, oh, are you mad at me for writing on the desk? Which I hadn't confessed to at that point, because I used to doodle on the desks. It was the only way I could pay attention. With my pencil, I'd write on the desk. And she said no, and then I realized it was that I left. So she takes my hand and walks me down to the principal's office, where on the wall is a black dial wall phone. She turns to me and says, what's your phone number? So I knew my mother would be home, and I knew that Ninny would not be. So I gave her Terry's number across the street. And of course, there was no answer, and answering machines had not yet been invented, and I knew Ninny wouldn't be home all day, so I knew this number would not get answered. About 5 days later was parent-teacher conferences, and I was sitting on the side porch at like 4 in the afternoon as my mom and dad walked, that's right, they walked to Dewey School from my house on Essex Street. And I knew when they went, they'd hear about what I did. And when they came back, they were angry. My mother spoke to me, and my father took me to the living room and pulled my pants down and spanked me with a belt. It was humiliating. It wasn't hard, it didn't hurt, but it was a precursor of what was to come next in my life. I knew it made me very uncomfortable. I remember it all to this day. I was so angry. I was angry that I tried really hard to ignore my friend who was picking on me until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was angry that I knew that she knew this and that she won. She got me to turn around and kick, which made her spill her papers, which I felt terrible about because I just wanted her to stop poking me. And I got in trouble. That's narcissistic behavior right there. And little did I know that I would be a setup for this my whole entire life. So why am I talking about anger today? Well, I was watching TV the other day, Good Morning America, and one of the people on Good Morning America is Michael Strahan. Used to be a football player, has a daughter named Isabella, who is bravely and wonderfully sharing her story of surviving brain cancer, a brain tumor. She was 19 when she was diagnosed, and she, being who she is and having access to television and media and being a model before her illness, she gets to tell her story, and I'm glad that she can, because the more people that can hear these stories, the better. But I sat there just angry, and I cried, and Kenny cried, and Jack wiped away our tears and asked, why are you crying? And I wasn't crying because I was upset that she was believed and that she was listened to and that she gets to ring the bell and that she got to have that whole process. I'm not mad at her. I'm not. I'm mad at the universe, and I'm mad at me, because why did Molly have to die? And it circles me back to the very first day I decided to do a podcast, and the very first day I decided to retrace my steps and try to figure out what led to the death of my daughter, Molly. I likely will never know until I die and go to the other side and learn all those things that I'm supposed to learn. I do know that I wouldn't wish child loss on anybody. And I'm grateful that Isabella Strahan's sister gets to have her sister and that they can potentially be bridesmaids at each other's weddings. She gets her sister. She didn't lose her sister. Gracie doesn't have her sister. She'll never have her sister. This hurts me, and it makes me sad, and it pisses me the fuck off. Now, most people, if I were to share these feelings with them, would tell me to cry it out. They might tell me to share it or journal it. They might ask me, am I getting therapy? And some would admonish my anger as unattractive and inappropriate. Well, don't get so mad now. I mean, I can see why you're sad, but for the most part, people understand, but there are those that don't, and society doesn't, especially in women. When women are angry, we're labeled crazy, we're labeled uncontrollable, unstable. The number of times people told me in my grief process not to cry in front of other people because it would make them uncomfortable are too many to count, let alone get angry. I've talked a lot about my grief tree, a tree across from Long Pond, which is the reservoir in Concord. And in the early days after Molly died that summer, I'd go out there and hold onto the tree and scream. I'd scream so loud that my eyes would vertical hemorrhage. My throat would be raw. When it got too buggy to scream at that tree, I'd scream in my car. When I found out the pathology report on Molly's tumor, that it was benign, that if the fucking doctors had just listened to me and cut the goddamn tumor out of her head, given her a CAT scan, that she would be alive, completely, totally alive, wouldn't have needed chemo or radiation, nothing. It was just a tumor, like my tumor, which was located in a place that it didn't bother anything. Why is my tumor a meaningless meningioma? Why did Molly get the astrocytoma that killed her? These things do not stop making me angry. So what do I do now? Well, I will tell you, I have thanked God every night in my prayers that Isabella survived her journey. And I have thanked God every night in my prayers that her family can use this to help others without suffering any tragic loss. They have their baby girl. They have their intact family. Their daughter isn't dead a mile from their house in a pink box in the ground. I went to the cemetery at night the other night, and it's a little creepy driving through there at night, and Molly's grave is lit up so pretty. And I sat there for a long time, just looking at her. And I got that similar rise of panic that she was alone here, that somebody could hurt her or steal her. It's not as bad now as it used to be, back when I was still not believing that she was actually dead. It was hard to picture her up there, because I pictured her alive, alone in a cemetery. But she's in there, that physical body that I washed in the tub and braided the hair and kissed the elbow and shoulder dimples and wiped the butt, all of it. That body's in there still. And while the anger has dissipated, because anger is like a volcano, I realize that it can come back at any time. So what does that do? It gets me thinking about other times I've been mad. I had some postpartum depression after Molly was born. It was pretty rough for about 2 weeks. And then it cleared up. I didn't think about it again. After Jack was born, of course, I had the culmination of Roy's erratic, horrible behavior and treatment of me, and then his blocking me completely from his life. That was heart-wrenching, but I also was just angry. And I think some of those actions on his part triggered in me all of the emotions I felt around everything I gave up for him and how ultimately my daughter died. I know there are people that will listen to this that will tell me, move on already. But the thing about moving on is you can't move on if something is holding you there. And it's not as easy as saying, oh, you're stuck. Okay, well, if you're stuck, then there's a reason you're stuck, and you have to process through to get unstuck. And every time I process through, I become more unstuck. But I have a lot of anger toward myself for Molly's death, and after Jack's birth, and looking at this teeny tiny human, and being a hormonal mess, I have to say, I had really bad anger after Jack was born. And he's seen a lot of it. He's seen it all his whole life. Now, anger is one thing. It's an emotion and a feeling. How it's expressed is where the issues can come about. So if I get angry and I punch a baby, well, that sucks, and that's not okay. I've never punched a baby, by the way. If I get angry and scream at the top of my lungs, well, that's much better. But if I scream at the top of my lungs at somebody and direct the anger toward them, well, that's not better at all. An empty car, a tree in a forest, places where my anger and the release of that anger doesn't create new things to eventually become angry about, and doesn't damage people in the process. It is human nature to fix the wrong thing. So when we look at domestic violence and rage, when we look at addiction and the rage and the violence and the anger that can come from addiction, when we look at people fighting and arguing, political fights, and the rage that people feel against Joe Biden or Donald Trump, when we look at the rage that people feel against their friends who support somebody different than they do, the hatred and anger and rage on social media right now is awful. And I just look at it. Those who know me will tell you they're surprised that I haven't been posting more. One of the first things I had to do is to stop posting angry, hurtful posts, attention-seeking, poor me posts. I go back to the analogy of the black and red ants in the jar, and you shake the jar, and the ants immediately think the other color ants are the jar shakers, when really it's an external force. That's an important piece of information around anger, that we fall back on what we think or believe or know or have experienced when something happens to us that's bad or scary or makes us feel powerless. We fall back on everything that we know and that we've seen and that we've learned to dictate a response. Sometimes we plan the response and sometimes it just happens. So for example, children that grow up in a violent household, they might know cognitively this is a bad thing, but it's what they learn. And they learn that when they were 2, their dad hit their mom. And when they were 5, their dad hit their mom. And when they were 15, their dad hit their mom. So it's not surprising that children from these families and these households move on to relationships that have the same actions. Not every child that sees his dad beat up his mom beats up his wife, but a high percentage of them do. And pretty much everyone that's ever beat up their wife has watched somebody beat up their mother. Women and girls that grow up watching their mothers take it and take it and take it learn very quickly that their job is to take it. A lot of political initiatives that squelch women rely on this. Oh, they won't fight back, and if they do, we can call them crazy, and it will further our agenda. Women and girls, people born in vagina bodies specifically, are taught from a very young age that it's our job to believe whatever we're told, and that if we disagree, we're somehow bad. This is a massive trigger for me to have an anger response. Don't tell me what I'm supposed to think or how I'm supposed to believe. And if I don't want to do what you ask, don't call me a name. Have a conversation with me. This morning, when I was pacing around the house, mad at myself for not following through on an interview around periods this week and realizing I need to record a podcast right now, today, February 2nd, I was getting madder and madder by the minute. I wrote a blog about Isabella Strahan and surviving her brain tumor, and I thought, all right, well, that's been on my mind all week. What can I do? And I picked up my notebook here. All these papers fell out of it, and I just immediately got enraged. God damn it! And I pick up the papers. Why can't I ever just pick up a fucking notebook? And Kenny says, why are you so angry? And I'm like, and there it is, my topic for the day. So I spent the next couple of hours talking about anger. Woohoo! So this is the season of lies and myth information. Here are some pretty common lies about anger, and we're lied to about anger all the time. And when I Googled this, hey Siri, tell me about lies about anger, like 3 Christian websites came up, and they were all very, very moralistic in nature. One of the lies was that anger is a natural emotion. Okay, well, it is. It's not a lie. So I realized that even in people trying to claim the lies, they're lying about the lies. This is information manipulation. It happens all the time. Everybody does it. Every side of every issue has people twisting information to push their agenda. This particular website that I read through took a couple of things from. So here's what I took from it. A lie is that anger is sinful. It is actually not sinful. There's no morality judgment on anger. That it's inappropriate. Well, anger itself is not inappropriate. How you express it and to whom could be massively inappropriate, but that's a different thing. It's unhealthy. Well, if you live in anger all the time, if you walk around holding that hot coal of anger in your hand long after the thing that made you angry is done, then yeah, maybe it's unhealthy. It's just as unhealthy to keep the anger in. That it's a negative exaggeration of events that occurred. Well, no, anger isn't an exaggeration of an event whatsoever. It's a response. It's a reaction. That it's socially unacceptable. Well, it is. Of every emotion we feel, it's okay to cry in public. It's okay to laugh in public. It's never okay to get mad in public. It scares people. People back off. They think you're unhinged or out of control. And that's probably true, male or female. When somebody gets to the point of being angry, we quickly try to de-escalate. Not because we think the anger itself is bad, but because of what might happen in the heat of anger. Another lie that's perpetuated and supported on the daily across cultures and political affiliations and religions is that on some level it's okay for men to be angry, that it's a logical male response. Men are more aggressive. Anthropologically speaking, they're designed to be the hunters. So of course they're going to get angry. They have testosterone, which is an aggressive hormone. Okay, all of those things might be true, but it doesn't mean it's okay. It might be biologically more common, but in a society that can move intellectually around biology, there's no excuse for saying, well, he was really mad, but he's a guy, so that's okay. Or, well, at least the outcome was all right, so his anger was justified. Anger might be justified. What you do in anger seldom is. And again, that's the difference. And it's never okay or acceptable for women to be angry. We're not supposed to be angry. Psychology Today, which is where I went next, had an article on anger, and it went one step further, and it said 3 major emotions tend to be just under the surface of an anger response: fear, powerlessness, self-protection. So I think of like walking in the woods and turning a corner and seeing a bear up on her hind legs with her babies over there. Okay, fear. I'm scared shitless. Powerless. No fucking way can I beat the bear. I can't outrun it. Nothing. Self-protection. I don't want to die today. So you rage at the bear as you back up. And you scare the bear and back away and scare the bear and back away. Are you really mad? Maybe. Another one that comes to mind is I have a friend who was run over by a car when she was 3, and her dad came out and saw her trapped under the car, and he was so scared and everything else, he lifted the car, and the neighbor was able to pull her out from under the tire. How many of you can lift a car? That's a fear response, fight or flight response, massive rush of adrenaline, increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, increased energy, dilated pupils, increased strength. Now, this doesn't always happen, but there are pretty amazing stories about it. Anger is an external event that triggers an internal emotion. So the external event was the little girl under the tire, and the internal emotion was rage that his little girl might die. It triggers an internal emotion or perception or belief, and that turns around and shows up as anger. Then I looked at a site called Natural Awakenings, and this talked about the danger of not releasing your anger, holding on to it. So this is the hot coal. It's funny, my neighbor Dave and I will be like, hot coal, hot coal, hot coal. So when you're mad at someone and you walk around being mad, and that person lives in a different town and they have no idea that you're mad, your anger isn't negatively affecting them at all. Your anger is like a hot coal in your hand. So it burns your hand. You're burning your hand with that hot coal of anger, and there's no effect at all to the person you're angry at. This has been a huge process for me in how I feel about my choices with Amy and Roy. I have a friend that asked me why I continued to bring that up and talk about it. But when you think that that experience in my life started in 2005, didn't really end in a meaningful way until 2021, that's 16 years. That's a long time. It's a massive chunk of the middle of my adult life. And connected to it is marriage loss, job loss, child loss, friendship losses, financial ruin. I mean, a lot of things. So I'm processing it. But walking around angry and seething, Amy and Roy don't know I'm feeling those things. So why am I wasting my energy on that? The doctors that didn't take care of Molly. Now, my grief is mine, but anger at them, if it eats me up and consumes me and is unhealthy for me, it's worthless. It's just a waste of time for me. Eventually, we have to learn to let go of the parts of anger that aren't helping us. That's what Natural Awakenings had to say. And it's a release method. So the release method basically says that you have to find a way to release the anger that you have inside. So obviously punching a wall is releasing it, but that doesn't necessarily solve what made you angry or give you pause to think about new ways to deal with the anger. It means you made a hole in a wall. You either now have to fix yourself or pay to get fixed. Holding on is considered bad. Releasing it from yourself is considered good, to reframe your anger. This is called Natural Awakenings from Atlanta. And they also say that anger itself is a lie. Anger is a defined emotion. I mean, maybe the things around it that cause it are lies. I'm not quite sure how anger itself could be a lie. A quote in this article said, "You must get angry to fight injustice." So I thought long and hard about that because Molly's life mission was to help people, to fight injustice. And I never once saw her come to this point out of anger. It was more observation that made her feel unsettled. So maybe did things make her a little mad? Sure. I remember in January of her 5th grade year when she came home and knew that Habaku would never, ever get enough points to get that scooter. He wouldn't. She asked my opinion on what I thought she should do. And I said, well, work really hard, get as many points as you can, and then decide on the day. So for months, she worked hard to get as many extra bonus points as she could. She didn't do that out of anger. It gave her an incredible purpose. So perhaps this movement, this action that would create social justice for her helped to mitigate the anger. She put those feelings of frustration against a situation she couldn't control into something positive. Another sort of common myth is that anger comes to us when we don't get our way. Well, yeah, I think a 2-year-old might get mad when they don't get their way. I think politicians get mad when they don't get their way. I think any major social agenda that resorts immediately to name calling and just negative responses is evident of this, not getting your way. So you just call people names. I have no room for that. The author of this article also comments that we're lied to all the time about anger. We're lied to on the news. We know that politicians lie to us. We are very conditioned to accept people lying to us. So much so that we often assume people are lying, maybe even when they're not. And what that does is it creates a situation where there's no sense of what's actually true. And all of that unsettling creates a powerlessness in us that then helps us resort to anger. So then I went to the Health Resource Network. And this talked a lot about that same process, that we're lied to a lot. So we become conditioned to lying. Taught that external events cause our anger. And men are quick to blame others for their anger. Roy did this all the time. You made me so mad. This is all your fault. I wouldn't have gotten mad at you if this. I can remember many, many instances of sitting on a couch or at a chair after, I made him mad and watching furniture get thrown and books get thrown and swears and name calling. And then he'd eventually be done and storm away. And I'd sit. In the early days, I would rush after and try to fix it. And it was never fixable. It just prolonged the ridiculousness. But very quickly, it would turn and it would become invisible like it never happened. And if I said, well, look, shouldn't we talk through it? Shouldn't we figure this out? I was met with, it's done. I'm done talking about it. Stop talking about it. If you keep talking about it, I'm going to get mad. You're not going to be happy. Talk about powerlessness. However, that's a very standard, in some ways, male response to put the blame outward. Female people, women, tend to blame inward. In my years and years coaching female athletes, it became clear to me that anorexia, bulimia, cutting and burning, where kids cut and burn themselves, pulling out hair, drugs and alcohol, compulsive sexual behavior, all of those things were the same thing. Puking your food was no different than cutting the skin on your arm. There was no difference, because what it did was, it was stress, 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 stress. Then you puke or you cut, and a huge relief. Oh, thank God I did that. And all the serotonin rushes through. And then the regret. Oh no, I can't believe I did that again. Oh my God, I suck. You wake up from your blackout drunk, or you wake up in bed with somebody that you don't recognize. You're immediately like, oh no. And then you go home and then you spend time, I'm never doing that again. And you do all these things to make it better. And then you do it again, right? This vicious cycle. Men blame outward and they become the major perpetrator of violent crimes. Women go inward and they become the major sufferer of very, very many self-detrimental mental illnesses. Anger. It's a vicious beast. In this article, Health Resource Network, there was a pretty detailed sort of explanation of anger and the anger response. Something happens, usually outside of you, but it could be inside. Your brain and body automatically views, perceives, understands what just happened through your history, through your own history, what you've experienced, what your reality and understanding of the world is, things that have been programmed. So you start to have a reaction. If the filters and judgments and interpretations line up just the right way, you get the emotion of anger immediately and without a choice. Line up in other ways, you might get guilt, you might get fear, you might get sadness. Typically, anger comes when you're already at the end of your rope when whatever happens, happens. Or you've created such a habit. I think of driving and getting cut off in traffic. I remember after Molly died, I didn't care. I didn't drive fast. I didn't care if I got cut off. I truly stopped caring. Remember the first time I had a little bit of road rage? I was like, oh, I must be getting better. I got mad at that driver. Sometimes it's an automatic knee-jerk response. You've conditioned yourself to be mad every time somebody cuts you off in traffic. Thus, it is the filters, judgments, and interpretations already programmed into your head that actually cause anger, and not the external event. That is incredibly true, because what pisses me off might not piss off 10 other people. 10 other grieving mothers might not be pissed off that Isabella Strahan survived her tumor. That might not bother them. It bothers me. That's because of what's going on inside of me around Molly's death. We're different. And anger is no different. What pisses me off might not piss off 10 other people. And what pisses them off would be nothing to me. Most people have never been taught what the specific filters, judgments, interpretations are that create anger. And we don't. Mostly what we teach about anger is how to mitigate it, how to control it once you have it, and how to not do it again by external controls. You punish kids. But once you do learn your internal triggers, how your internal beliefs affect how you respond, you can start to replace the narrative. The new big buzzword for this is neuroplasticity and reprogramming your brain, right? All the life coaches now talk about how they can help you rewire your thought process. We can all rewire our thought processes. Sometimes it's just as easy as turning a different way out of the driveway, right? Do a physical thing differently. Triggers doing everything differently. You can learn how to make your anger disappear more quickly whenever you want. It's not by focusing on the anger, it's the 2 or 3 steps before you get mad. And if you really stop in the middle of a rage and think 2 or 3 steps back, usually the answers are pretty obvious. This isn't easy. I watched a little video on this after one of the movies I watched. These anger management therapists were teaching this man and this woman how to not be so mad. It was interesting. They had a hard time with it, but they actually could both see that they needed to do this.
And you can change yourself over time from someone who gets mad all the time to someone who really gets mad. So I'm going to go back to me because Jack's first question when he wakes up or when I tuck him into bed or when I go into a room where I haven't seen him all day is, are you happy? Are you angry? So Jack saw a lot of angry me as a baby, a ton. I really fell apart there for a while. Some of it was postpartum. It was anger that was illogical. I was never angry at Jack ever, but boy, did having him and the changes and the disruptions bring up a lot of repressed anger for me. David Kessler, a grief therapist, talks about how when parents respond in anger to news of their child's death, it's often logged as inappropriate. Dad shows inappropriate anger. When I was told that we were too late, and I've told this story several times before, Dr. Luther across from me saying, well, we're too late. What do you mean we're too late? We've been here since 9 o'clock this morning. His eyes got wide. Well, if she were a 60-year-old woman, I would not have even come to this hospital. But blah, 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 blah. And I did that scream thing. And I thought someone else was screaming. It was me. And I crawled across the table and I peed my pants and I yelled and raged and went nuts. I just went nuts. And all the doctors and nurses wanted to give me medicine and calm me down. Like my reaction was the problem, not the fact that those pathetic doctors killed my kid. There's a rage sentence right there. That's a sentence out of anger. I love it. That's how I felt and still feel sometimes. So there are processes we can do. It's all that self-reflection crap. Take a deep breath. So back to Jack in my life. I realize that he sees me angry a lot. As much as a 2 or a 3 or a 4-year-old can understand, I try to teach him the difference between anger and frustration. And if I'm really angry, then I'm not angry at him, but it must be awful to be near somebody who's angry. So believe it or not, enough of these conversations have helped him to separate himself from my anger. But children watch, and they learn from what they watch. And there are times when Jack will get really mad really fast and just throw stuff. And Kenny will, sometimes get mad at him for that. Like, Kenny, you can't get mad at him. He's copying me. He's copying me. It's our job to help him see that what I'm doing is wrong, that I'm the one that needs to fix it so that he can copy me and fix it himself. He's better at it. We talk about it a lot. I went through his toys and said, it's okay to throw this one, like a Nerf ball or a stuffed animal, because it won't break. You don't want to throw hard things because not only could the toy break, but it could break a window. That if you're really mad, it's better to go outside and throw things. It's okay to scream when you're mad, and he will. Sometimes he'll just rage. When I hear him scream, I always run in because I want to make sure that he's okay. Usually he's just playing make-believe, but a lot of his make-believe have his characters being really mad. That's on me, and I am so mad. The number of times I say to myself that I wish I could go back to the summer of 2005 and just please have a do-over. I think my life would be very different. Of course, I don't know. Maybe some other different horrible thing would have happened that didn't. We can't predict these things. But that's the powerlessness that can precede anger. All right, so then I watched a movie called The Subtext of Anger, and this was fantastic. It was on YouTube. It was a 46-minute movie. It's totally worth watching. But it was made in 2012. Here's another thing. I've Googled, documentaries on blah, blah, blah. When I was doing research on periods, 90 gazillion films came up. Anger, it was really difficult to find. They had a couple of different scenarios where people would have anger, and it was interesting to watch and what they did. So basically, the subtext of anger is that there are these 7 sorts of aspects of anger that play into anger. And the first one is called the wheel. And so basically, you think of a wheel just rolling along, that as you go through life, things happen to you, external things, experiences, and you have emotions and feelings that you react to them with. But as a child, you watch how other people in your life react to these things, and you pick up on that. So this goes into a lot of generational trauma and generational behaviors because the wheel keeps rolling and the behaviors continue to follow the wheel down the road. So children learn by watching. If they see that anger is a daily thing, then they know it's okay. And then it gets into other aspects of anger that children are witness to that are deemed okay. Lots of TV shows have angry people on there, and there's always a resolution, and the anger continues in the next episode. So it's not like there's resolution and the anger stops. So we're conditioned always to know that anger is always going to come up, and maybe it is always going to come up. But if it's the same person in the same scenario over and over again, we're not getting any better. So here's my wheel. This is when the person that develops the anger might be utilizing the anger to fulfill their own need. Like somehow it makes me feel better to be mad. I didn't get my podcast recorded on Friday. I've been super sick. And so I knew I'd have to do it on the weekend. So here it is Sunday afternoon. and I hadn't gotten it done yet. And so I'm frustrated. And I had said to Kenny, I need 3 hours if you could be gone by noon. So noon comes and goes. Now it's 12:30. Now it's 1 o'clock. So Kenny comes down and says, so what are we doing again? And I just started to cry. I was just frustrated. And I'd been with Jack by myself for 2 hours trying to watch this movie and everything else. And, I could have, if he had left at 10 o'clock with a dirty Jack and a dirty Kenny and driven around for a few hours, I would have been done with the research and the podcast. I know this. This is not different than any other Sunday in my whole life. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, including my editor, are eye rolling right now. Like, yeah, we've heard it. So what's the deal? So this is an example of the anger wheel, where I know I can predict the outcome. I follow the steps anyway, claiming to hope that maybe it'll be different this time, knowing full well it won't be different, and then getting mad when it isn't. So for me, if I were to take an anger management class, this is an example, something I would bring up right away. Continuing to be mad at something that you already know is going to happen, that sort of predictability. Then it goes into expressions of anger, and it talks about how we express it differently. Men tend to express anger outwardly violently. They get angry, they punch a wall, they swear, they scream, that kind of thing. Or they break something. Women get angry and they turn inward, or they yell at their kids, or they become passive aggressive in their relationship, or they say that they're fine, or they become alcoholic, or they start starving themselves or eating a ton. They do all sorts of things to soothe their feelings and emotions that are detrimental. That's the tendency. Not everyone does these things, but that's the tendency. Culturally, though, we're culturally taught in certain religions and cultures and countries that anger expression needs to be a certain way. So an angry woman in Japan looks nothing like an angry woman in Israel, who looks nothing like an angry woman in Italy. Very, very different. We're expected to express our anger in different ways. Media images can express anger differently. Video games, where you have these cartoon characters blowing people up. Jack is obsessed right now with Five Nights at Freddy's, and he's obsessed with Nerf guns. And he told me today that he wanted to watch a Nerf gun movie, but he would wait till I wasn't home so I wouldn't make him turn it off. He's 3.5 and he's already like, but that's not lost on me. He has a draw to this. So I can't just squelch the draw and tell him no. I need to process this draw somehow, see where it's coming from, and mitigate it as best I can. Men are often encouraged to be angry. Come on, get out there, fight like a man, be tough. Little boys, my little man, we don't call our daughters our little women. We call them our little princess, right? Princesses are docile and perfectly coiffed and they don't make a mess, right? They're not allowed or encouraged to be aggressive. There's a great commercial, female athletes, and they show tennis players getting angry and how, because men do that. John McEnroe used to chuck tennis rackets across the courts all the time. It was sort of a joke. Here he goes again. And then women do it, and the commentator jokes aren't necessarily jokes, but it's more like, wow, she's unhinged and all this. And then the online comments are, oh, she must be having her period, or maybe she got dumped, or, like, okay, maybe she's just mad that she had a bad tennis game. So there's a lot of gender separation there in terms of expression. Then we get into the aspects, anger with depression, anger with fear, and anger with anxiety. So anger is oftentimes an expression of these three feelings. You're so depressed. So the hard part is depression, that total feeling of utter helplessness and failure. And you're so overwhelmed with it that your anger is self-directed and you have suicidal ideations. There are lots of people who will say people that die by suicide are cowards, and I feel completely the opposite way. I feel that it all got to be so much, that knowing how much their death might hurt somebody didn't stop them from doing it. To me, that's a measure of anger and pain and frustration I can't even wrap my head around. And I have a dead fucking kid. That's a pretty profound sense of anger and helplessness right there. And a couple of the people in this movie talked about that, the subtext of anger, that a lot of their outward anger was their feeling that they really just wanted to die, but maybe not knowing they shouldn't, or having kids and they know they can't, and so they don't, that kind of thing. Anger as an expression of fear. Oftentimes, when you're really, really afraid about something, you don't want anyone to know you're afraid, so you get mad, and it comes out of fear and anxiety. So the biggest thing is feeling that you can't escape or you're trapped. Another thing is feeling that you don't achieve your goals. So this is me. I'm so mad. Like, what the hell? Every time I try to do something for me, it gets derailed and I waste my time doing 9,000 things for other people. I don't know what the answer is to this. I do know that when I don't achieve what I think I should, I end up getting angry. And this is where the anticipating that needs are not going to be met comes in. And that's my wheel with Kenny. I anticipate, nope, oh well, fuck it, I'm not going to get to work out. Right. Okay, the next one is anger and stress. One of my favorite units that I taught in health class was stress. There's distress, which is bad stress. So it could be tolerable stress or toxic stress. That's distress. And then there's positive stress, which is called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, eustress. Planning a wedding, planning a vacation, remodeling a home. All of those things are wonderful things that are incredibly stressful, right? But with a positive stress, it's manageable. You can find support when you don't know what color to pick, or the sink comes in wrong, or the job takes a year when it shouldn't have, my situation. You realize that it's a manageable stress. And once it's over, it's over. Tolerable stress is the kind of stress that you can weather. So maybe your plumbing leaks, so you have to get buckets and call a plumber. Yeah, that's stressful, but it gets fixed. Life gets back to normal. The thing is over. Tolerable stress. Those can be day-to-day stressors. I'm late for work today, that kind of thing. Oh, we're out of bread, so I had to make sandwiches on crackers. Those are reactions and situations that are tolerable. I got a flu, so I have to miss 3 days of work and I don't get to go to the dance. Right. And then you have toxic stress, and it's bad stress and it can't be fixed. So that's like Roy stress, like being in a relationship that you can't get out of, that you desperately want to stay into, but you want it to be different. And it's never going to get better, but you can't extricate. That's toxic stress. Toxic stress is watching the news. And this is where political agendas work purposely to give us toxic stress, because a toxically stressed out person isn't going to think for themselves. They're not going to respond in a good way or a helpful way sometimes. They're a much more malleable community. So toxic stress would be chronically watching the news. Toxic stress is a child who is molested or abused. They're a kid. Where are they going to go live? So every day is a vigilant exercise in self-preservation. Toxic stress. All of these stressors can contribute to angry outbursts and angry situations. I know that for me, most of my life, my anger was self-directed. I found people that would hurt me to validate the fact that I suck and I should be mad at myself. And then when I would find the truth out about someone I loved or that friendship, I'd hate myself for being so stupid to choose that friend, as I blindly chose the next identical friend. And the friend piece for me has been one of the biggest eye-openers for me, even as I speak right now, about why I have such unresolved anger. Because if you're continuing a pattern that you've now learned is bad, even if you haven't connected it to the person in your life, then you're going to continue to have anger. And I have a longtime person in my life that the eye-opening experiences of the last couple of months have been heart-wrenching. But I also know that I feel a huge relief. So I'd rather be alone and seem friendless than surrounded by people that ultimately aren't my friends. So that's hard to take, but a good thing. So another aspect of long-term stress is that even when, chronic stress is that or toxic stress is that when the stressor is done, you're still mad about it. So like my job loss all those years ago, I can still get enraged at Chris Rath. It's not like it was. I wouldn't say hi to her on the street if I saw her. When I do see her, I look at her and look away. And on a spiritual level, I pray pretty consistently for forgiveness for her on her behalf. But I also know that I can use my words to share what she did to me in a very matter-of-fact way, and that helps alleviate my anger. But if I'm still holding a hot coal, Chris Rath could give a flying hoot if I'm mad at her. If I'm burning my hand and she doesn't care, then what am I doing? It's kind of like that. So number 6 is the loop. So this is the idea that the more you do something, the stronger that habit gets. And pretty soon you're doing the angry behavior on the smallest of triggers. The example in the movie was the guy that swore and screamed and yelled anytime someone cut him off, even if he wasn't late, even if the traffic wasn't bad, even if it was clear that the guy had plenty of room, he would just immediately choose rage. So it's described as, every time you circle the path, anger becomes the rule, not the exception. This is a good example in domestic violence. There was no violence in the beginning of the relationship. It's not like the person had more self-control in the beginning. The person hadn't developed the pattern. The first trigger came, which built upon the second trigger. Pretty soon the first trigger could happen with minimal provocation, with even perceived provocation. The domestic violence, like the violent husband comes home and the wife has been home all day doing everything she's supposed to do. And one little thing is off, and that's the trigger. And pretty soon a 6-hour beating ensues with accusations of everything. What are you going to do there? That's never going to be okay. The other piece is the hormonal cycle. So this is what I talked about with anorexia and cutting being the same thing. So it's the same with anger. All the hormonal things that go into place, adrenal glands and stress response and norepinephrine and epinephrine and everything, and all that rush of adrenaline. And it's a rush. and all the body changes, dilated pupils and heart rate goes up. Okay, that happens when you're angry. It happens when you orgasm. It happens on a lesser extent when you deliver a baby, all these things happen and then you have this massive release, right? So good things can cause this very same experience. So the more you do it, the more you get angry. I don't know that it works with orgasms. That would be nice, wouldn't it? If you could think it and have one, yay. That's not quite how it works. But the point here is that the more that you walk the path of using anger as a response, the better you get at using anger as a response, the more likely we are to use anger as a response. And I could see that with me. Even this morning, I had nothing to be mad at. Everything was fine. I just had this rage. I also know this is what it's come to for me now. There are times when start to be frustrated and I'll just go, like just clench my fist. Oh my gosh. And then I'll take a breath. I'm like, Barb, it's okay. It's okay. So that little bit of expression of rage calms me down a bit now. I used to do it 20 times a day. I don't do it. Sometimes I'll go days and days without doing it. Super helpful. So information overload, the higher the stress, the lower the tolerance for stress, and the lower the tolerance for triggers that can cause an angry reaction. Here's the other piece, social media and the pandemic. So social media connects us to the world. When I was in Bali, Indonesia, I could text on my phone to Gracie. I could FaceTime her on WhatsApp. I could email and talk to her on the computer. I could post on my social media and she could respond and post back. So talk about increased connection. But we have not increased our relationships. We have not increased intimacy. We have not increased our ability to communicate effectively with each other. It's gotten far worse. And you see it. I had a former school board member, text me after we voted to keep the middle school where it was here in Concord. His reasons why he disagreed, and then he told me, "You suck." This is a grown man that has done wonderful things for children. And his response was all the reasons why I was a snot rocket and the snotty people won and I suck. This is the perfect example of what social media and texting and instant messenger and Facebook Messenger and Instagram Messenger and Twitter and everything else. You can sit in the comfort of your own home and say horrible things. Or you can lie and say wonderful things. My life is great, as you're, vomiting blood, right? We've disconnected from the response of our words. So he typed "you suck" and hit send. And then he went back to whatever he was doing, drinking his vodka or sleeping or watching his TV. I don't know what he was doing. If he had seen me on the street and read the words to the text to me in person, that would have been completely different. And quite honestly, I don't think he would have done it. I know in young people that those years of isolation with COVID for like middle school and high school students and even college students, but specifically middle school students who don't have the maturity yet to balance this out, learned very quickly that anything was okay online. And this is where a lot of social contagions come. It's where unhealthy trends among young people come. You tell somebody something online and there's no conversation to process that. You're not talking. And a typed conversation isn't the same. There's no inflection. There's no facial expression. It's words on the paper. Sometimes I reread a text I sent and I think, God, that sounds angry. And I'm not angry at all. That's where you lose it in translation, so to speak. And I remember when computers in the late 90s, when computers and the internet first became accessible to everyone. And all these girls on cross country, I'm like, "Oh, you guys going to go like to Pasta House tonight? Or are you going to go hang out at someone's house?" And they're like, "No, we don't have to anymore. We can all go home and like get in our jammies and just talk on instant messenger." And I'm like, "Oh, so you were like all talking like on a speakerphone?" No, you just type. It was the weirdest thing. I'll never forget it, quite honestly. And so I got instant messenger because I wanted to, it was AOL Instant Messenger. I wanted to see what they were doing. And so you couldn't see the private conversations, of course, but it was eye-opening to me, the things that people posted. I remember a whole group of kids made a pyramid of picnic tables at Memorial Field and posted it. And so I messaged one of them and said, "You just posted this and I just saw it. So I know that you might not think this is going to stay private, but you've got to take it down, take the post down immediately," which they did. And the next day they thanked me. And all it was stacking picnic tables. But I know a former runner of mine, they logged all of their, it was hazing, but it wasn't mean. It was freshmen and they dressed them all up in funny outfits and makeup and they went running through town and had them do all these silly pranks. They all did them together, but they posted it and it went against the university's bullying policy. So none of the girls felt bullied or coerced. They felt it was a team building activity, but they posted it. 5 years prior, there would have been no posting of this. It would have been talked about. The good side of this is a lot of bad behaviors come to light and can be dealt with and mitigated. But lots of times people share things thinking they're safe because I'm in my living room when I put it on my computer. Nobody saw me put it here, but now it's immediately public knowledge. So I would always often say to my kids, if you wouldn't say it to my face, don't type it to me in a letter or on a computer. Like, you can't lose that direction. So what does this have to do with anger? We slowly stop learning communicative skills that can resolve conflict. So we immediately call people names. Oh, you don't believe in the Jewish faith? You're anti-Semitic. No, I'm not. I just believe that Jesus was a prophet. So I love and respect the Jewish religion. I love and respect the Christian religion. I love and respect all the religions. I'm not an anti-anything. I'm not phobic of anything. I don't have to practice things and agree that they're right in my life to still be considered supportive and inclusive and loving. And I won't use specific examples because I've learned now, doesn't matter how I couch it, people are going to name call because that's how we do it now. I've lived long enough now to also know that all of these things are a process, that things come around, they circle around. I've been in education long enough to see the same reading methods come into favor and out of favor and back into favor and out of favor. Phonics, no phonics, phonics, no phonics. It's just, new math, old math, new math, old math. The answers to the questions don't change. How you find the answers changes. Nothing is wrong with that. That's all amazing. But in the process of building culture and a workable, inclusive society and a country that doesn't fight red or blue, liberal or conservative, we're functioning on anger right now, which is a contribution to the anger level of everybody that lives anywhere that's experiencing this anger. More connected, less engaged. That's the word. Another piece with the social media is the posturing and competition. Competition can bring out anger as well. I have to be better. I have to be better. I have to win. I have to be first. It's hard. We had the CDA competition party last night, and it was a blast. And it was like 53 girls were there. And so it was all about getting ready for the comp season. We did team building and get to know each other, icebreakers and that sort of thing. Hillary and I gave a little talk, and we talked about competition is wonderful as long as it's in a healthy perspective. If your teammate wins a title and you don't, it's okay to be sad and angry that you didn't win. And when you get home, you share that with your mom or your best friend that's unconnected to dance. You don't take it out on the winner. It's not her fault that she won. It's not her fault that you didn't. Your teammates. And this is really hard. And I told a story about Molly and Gracie being ignored by a trio of girls that won everything. And then one day they had an off day and Molly and Gracie had a great day and Molly and Gracie won. And they didn't get a handshake or anything on the stage. It was pretty ugly. And we talked about it. So this is another thing that can contribute to anger and resentment is being competitive. The seventh and sort of final construct of anger is tempering the emotion. That's number 7. Is it okay to get angry? Abso-fucking-lutely. It's necessary. It's healthy. Storing it up can cause stress responses that are negative. It's the expression of anger, how you mitigate the anger, and how you move from it so you're not constantly living in an angry state. And this is, I think, where I will spend a long time. I've spent lots of money over almost 2 years now talking to Carolina. I'm in my 3rd year. Money well spent, by the way, talking about my anger and all the onion layers, peel the onion back to my anger. So the first aspect of tempering the emotion is simplicity. The world can be too complicated. Simplify your life. Make it just a bit more simple, or take whatever's bothering you and break it into simple workable pieces. The example here was a guy that wanted a cell phone, couldn't understand his iPhone. He goes, I just want to call people, have people call me, be able to text them and leave them messages. That's it. I don't want to take pictures. I don't want to go online. It's just a flip like a phone. Back when a phone was only a phone. Now a phone is like your whole entire life, and there's a design to that. It's social control, it's social monitoring. People laugh, oh, pretty soon we're gonna have computer chips. We already have them, we carry them in our hands. Mine's listening to me right now. Hi, phone. So simplicity, trying to keep things from being too complicated. Responsibility. This is not only what we do to make our lives simple, but it's what's happening in our environment that affects anger. There is no simplicity. Everything has to be complex and multi-stepped. What's simple are the tasks that require us to use our brain. You don't have to read a book or find an encyclopedia or go to the library to answer a question. You can just ask your phone, right? So the responsibility of people that create these realities is to keep it simple, and they don't. This is where marketing comes in. And that movie that I talked about, Buy Now, Amazon and those other online sellers manipulate people. And the woman in this example talked about working in marketing and how hideous marketing meetings were because it was all about social manipulation. So marketers take it too far. And we also focus on the wrong things. So, Tiger Woods is a multimillionaire, billionaire maybe, because he can hit a little ball into a hole. Yet teachers work their whole lives and help hundreds of thousands of kids, right? And make a livable wage and get criticized for their livable wage, right? Tiger Woods, now granted, he's a great golfer and we pay for entertainment. We want to calm ourselves down, make people more stressed. They'll pay more money for entertainment. They'll pay more money for beer. They'll pay more money for vodka. You have a pandemic, and one of the necessary things, stores that stayed open that you could go to, liquor stores. Sports stars can make millions of dollars, a $200 million contract, and teachers make $100,000 a year. Now, that's good money, but it's not $200 million. But the golfer is more important than the teacher. This is internalized by us. TV shows, you watch any sort of sitcom or movie, and the cars and the houses, the things that people drive are beautiful. And they're the unspoken ones. They just exist. If you see something that's really run down or poor, it's making a social statement. You don't have the successful family driving a beat or secondhand car. You have them driving a gorgeous Audi or a Volvo. This creates an idea that you can just have things. The separation of money, too, we don't use cash. We use a little plastic card. So there's no real connection to the worth of money. All right, the third thing here, we have simplicity, responsibility, change. So when you think of a wheel turning, right, it turns on a little, think of the axle of a car. It's a bar that turns fast. And then as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, the wheel turns. And if you can see me, I'm doing this. So in my tap dance, we have what's called a pinwheel. It's a line that makes a plus, and we go around in a circle. So the people on the inside have to take teeny little steps because they're going the shortest distance. And the people on the outside get whipped around because they have the furthest distance to go. So if the middle of the circle speeds up even the teeniest bit, the dancers on the outside of the circle can't keep up. It's an unbelievable balance. It's such a physics response. It's amazing. This is the same thing with how we affect change. A small change at the inner part of the wheel can slow the wheel down exponentially. So one of the ways that we can mitigate anger is to release it, to find healthy ways to release it. They had a PE teacher on there who's an athlete, and he said, athletics, my sports, for me, was always a way to get rid of rage and anger. And of course, that's my story. When I first started running, it was the most powerful thing. And it was the first time I felt okay in my body. And then when the self-blame piece is when the running started to hurt, like I was physically uncomfortable and I wanted to stop. And I ran so hard I puked or peed my pants. It was like, it was like this, I beat the anger and I hurt myself enough that it didn't win. So, okay, winning a race, that might be good, but, slicing yourself with a knife or burning yourself with a cigarette so it doesn't win might not be such a good thing. Playing drums or musical instruments, theater, all of these things, all these expressions, dance, can be physical movement ways of mitigating and dealing with anger. Acceptance, right? So we talk about acceptance in like the 5 stages of grief, right? So if you can learn to heal the most innermost demons inside of you, separate from your anger response, if you focus on the anger response, that's what you're focusing on, being angry. But if you can heal the inner demons that trigger the emotions that come out as anger, then the anger will dissipate. Sometimes it's when you focus on those, you'll suddenly notice, why I haven't been angry all day. I have to talk to myself sometimes out loud to change my behavior, which then changes my anger. Mindfulness was next, and that's living in the moment. If you're mindful, you're aware and open and paying attention to right now. You are not responding and reacting to things that you feel you can't control. And the hardest part for me in mindfulness, I'm much better at it now. I didn't like what I saw when I was mindful. All my reality came back. So I was promulgating a chaotic lifestyle, self-protection, which is back to fear, which is back to anger. Notice your surroundings, be in the moment. And then rhythm. So rhythm is symbiosis, the balance of life, that you have to pace yourself. You can't fix it in a day. You can't get in shape in a day. You can't lose 30 pounds in a day. That you have to find the balance. There's a beautiful Baha'i quote, this is the balance. This is the balance. Symbiosis and balance is incredibly difficult to do. The human body, it's called homeostasis, balance. It balances everything out. The human body has the most unbelievable ability to survive. And where you live and what you eat and what climate you're in and what happens to you teaches your body what it has to do to survive. And anger is an outcropping of this. Anger is a piece of this. Sometimes it's not what you're angry about. It's not the event itself, but how tightly you hold on to it. how tightly you hold on and no, I can't let go. And I go back again to that movie Homeless to Harvard, where the little girl is holding on so tight to the apartment she lives in with her family that she ends up losing it all and having to go off with social services. And, they told her to go to school and she just wouldn't go to school. And no, I'll go. I promise I'll go. And had she gone to school, she could have stayed home. Oh my gosh, she was holding on so tight to what she wanted. So I look at my own life. I look at the Molly B Foundation and how tightly I hold on to having it be about Molly. And we're to the point now where people didn't know Molly. When I do merchandise sales and nobody buys anything, I just get sad. Well, the Molly B Foundation people didn't know Molly, so a lot of that merchandise isn't going to be meaningful to them. I get that. The example in the movie was a little chick, a little newborn chick. If you hold it in your hand, it's fine. If you squeeze it tightly, you kill it. So sometimes you can damage things in your life and feelings and your health and everything by clinging too much to something. And I do this sometimes in what I want the Molly B Foundation to do, in what I want in my life. Sometimes clinging gives you beautiful gifts. I clung to motherhood and I have this amazing child named Jack. That doesn't mean I don't have moments where I think to myself, had I not had a baby at 57, where would I be right now? Would I be living somewhere else? I would have all day to work out? How would my life be different, right? And maybe that's why I sabotage my workouts. I feel guilty somehow. I don't know. But this is the beauty of it. Balance, 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 symbiosis, homeostasis, find the balance. So am I less mad about my life than I was this morning? No, I'm pretty fucking pissed. But it isn't bubbling under the surface like it was. It's better somehow in my head and in my reality. So that's that. That's sort of how I feel right now. This is huge growth for me. I learned at a young age that any anger I expressed was inappropriate and wrong. When I look back, my anger was just so utterly justified. Does that justify my ways of expressing it? No, I was a child though. And I watched my mother throw salt and pepper shakers at my dad. I knew what my dad did to me and I heard him yell at my mother. I saw both sides of my adult family tell me to lie. I was just trapped in this hypocritical, uncontrollable situation. And I'm surprised sometimes I'm not more angry. The time I wanted to tell my grandmother, who was insulting my mother, found out my dad and mom had gotten divorced, that I wanted to tell her what my dad did. My mother slammed her hand over my mouth and told me to be quiet. I learned at a very young age that anger was never okay and that I specifically felt like I had no right to ever show anger. And I didn't all that much. I really didn't. And I think now that I've gone through all these processes of losing Molly and losing my job and Amy and Roy and my first husband, Eric, and this charter school situation and Robin, I'm an idiot. I just gravitate towards these people. See, I'm an idiot. I see it like I'm the idiot. But a lot of my anger is self-directed. I think a lot of ours are. The final piece of anger I'll talk about, because it's how this whole podcast episode started, is anger and grief. In the 5 stages of grief, one of them is anger. It's a natural part of grieving any loss, whether the loss is a job or a person or a marriage or a reality or a past or a future. No matter what it is you lose, anger is a piece of the process to get better. You have to be angry. And I tell people this all the time. It's the biggest piece of advice I give to grieving mothers is don't let other people tell you what you should or shouldn't feel or how you should express it. Choose a way to express it that doesn't cause more trouble if you can, but if you can't, you can't. And understand that these feelings will come back again and again and again, forever and always, but they'll spread out and not be so bad. So I got really mad that I had to watch yet another family have their daughter survive from that brain tumor when my daughter didn't survive hers. And I think that will piss me off forever. And there it is. And there it is. So listen, be good to yourself. If you need to be mad, go ahead and be fucking mad. Be mad, scream at a tree, swear the alphabet. Do whatever you need to do to feel better, but take care of yourself that way. Be good to someone else. Sit with somebody while they're angry. Let them express it and validate their feelings. Let them know it's okay that you're still their friend, even though they're really mad. And as usual, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.